Hello fellow StarCraft 2 players and welcome to another GosuBuilds guide. This time we're going to be looking at Thorzain's TVP build. Now in the same way that Bomber's build is very focused towards the mid-game and waiting until Protoss has AoE and then engaging with your just ginormous amount of bio a little bit later than the normal 1-Rax-FE medevac build hits, this build focuses on the exact opposite, where you try to go a little bit earlier and you try to hit Protoss once you have medevacs but before they have AoE out. So with this build, you're very rushing everything. You get a faster stim, you get a faster tech lab, you get a faster factory, you get a faster medevacs, and you're just pushing everything a little bit early. And however, that means your mid-game is very weak. So the Bomber's build gets you 5 barracks for the mid-game where you're reproducing a lot. This one actually only gets you 2. However, your actual army at the 9:30, 9:45, 10-ish minute marks are very large compared to what they otherwise would be. And same thing compared versus the 1-Rax-FE into medevacs. It's the same sort of comparison, where basically this build just gets you a little bit faster everything. Not quite as much versus the Bomber's build, but same idea applies. It starts normal, just like every other 1-Rax-FE. You get the 10 depot, you get the 12 barracks, and then you do not get gas at 13 because you're just producing straight Marines and straight SCVs. And again, just like with Bomber's build, how you don't want to scout too early because you're just trying to push everything a little bit earlier. This build, likewise, you don't want to scout too early, and you don't want to pull workers off the line for too long because you're trying to push everything a little bit early. Different things are being pushed early, but it's the same idea. So usually what Thorzain likes to do and what DeMuslim likes to do is scout at 15 supply right around now, or 16 supply with this SCV who finishes the barracks instead of the SCV who finishes the depot. You start one Marine, you start the orbital, and then you do not start the second Marine. And because of that, you're able to get this command center also at 17 supply.
Want a piece of me, boy?
Right there. And then you finally can get a depot started, all on 17 supply. Right there, and then go back to SCV and Marine production. So again, you get the orbital command as soon as the barracks finishes. This one Marine is all you have. You don't want to build any more than one Marine until this command center's down, this depot started, and then you go back to SCVs and then Marines. So this is the same way that you approach any 1-Rax-FE, where you get the command center before the second depot. You have to do that. Okay, and here we get to actual Thorzain's build. You start your second Rax, and instead of getting a third Rax like normally happens, you actually get both gas geysers earlier. So, you're on 2 barracks and 2 gas, and then finally you can get your bunker in the low ground. And this means that versus all-ins like Void Rays, you're just not going to have the same amount of units. Versus Blink, you're not going to have the same amount of units when you're dealing with all-ins. So this is a little bit more dangerous version of the standard 1-Rax-FE, or even Bomber's build. But the good news about this build is it gets you Marauders pretty quickly. So if you're dealing with Blink, or if you're dealing with a 4-gate or something like that, you're going to have the Marauder count. You put 3 in each gas geyser as soon as they finish, and then when you have 75 gas, which is as soon as this barracks finishes, you start a reactor on the first one and a tech lab on the second one. Now note, you have absolutely no capacity to produce any units right now. So if Protoss attacks you right now, you're very much screwed. You have 1 bunker and that's it. That means your scouting needs to be good. You need to make sure that you see nothing and that you or better yet, you see something, and that is an expand by your opponent. And you need to make sure that once you're doing this build, Protoss is not attacking you right now, because you're going to have a bad time. Good news is, once you start this tech lab, this build actually produces Marauders, as opposed to every other TVP build ever. You never want to start early Marauders. With this one, you actually kickstart your Marauders really early. In fact, as soon as your tech lab finishes, and you're making a Marauder and 2 Marines at a time, which is actually more than any other TVP build gets you. And with this Marauder, you can actually take map control a little bit. I like to send it to the first watchtower, and then maybe send a worker over here. And you actually get to shoo off Protoss's first Stalker really early, and that scares Protoss, so that's always good. Scaring Protoss is always good. Then finally, when you have 100 gas, or a little bit afterwards, constant Marauder production, constant Marine production, and start stim. But once you have around 100 gas, you start the factory, and then just like normal, when you have the money, you want to be starting an NG bay, And then with this build, you actually delay the third gas a little bit, and we'll see that come into action in a second. So just constant Marauders, constant Marines, and then as soon as this factory's done, and don't get supply blocked like I do there for a second, as soon as that factory's done, you should have just enough money, and you'll see I'll have just enough money to throw down that reactor and start forward so that you can swap off in a second. NG Bay finishes, start +1 attack, right there. And so now you're going to have a bunch of Marauders. Right now, when we look at the units tab, I have 4 Marauders at 7 minutes and 45 seconds versus 0, what you normally have. So once you have a bunch of Marauders and Marines, and then Medevacs you're going to be pushing out, and you're going to have +1 Stim, Combat Shields, and Concussive Shells, basically at 9:30, even before that sometimes. Around now is when you get the 3rd refinery. It's timed to be about when you start +1 attack. But it's a little bit iffy. And then finally you can produce 2 Medevacs at a time, and now you should have a very sizable army. It's 8:30, note that. This is a whole minute before when you normally start Medevacs. So at 8:30 you're starting Medevacs, and you'll be able to push out at 9, basically, with Stim, a bunch of Marauders. Again, I'm at 5 Marauders now and 14 Marines, and then an actual army. So this build is very, very, very aggressive, very early. But notice how if you look at our infrastructure, what can we reproduce? 1 Marauder and 2 Marines at a time. If you compare that to Bomber's build, where you can produce 3 Marauders and 4 Marines at a time, you see which one is more focused towards the mid-game. However, this army right here is incredibly strong. Let me pause it right now, and this is when you're moving out once you get 2 Medevacs, and it's 9... I should have moved out a couple seconds ago, but basically around 9 minutes, 9:15, you're moving out, and you have a very sizable army. However, it's not reproducing. So, what Thorzain likes to do is get a 3rd command center right now, and just push the late game as fast as possible. He's not focused on the mid-game, this build is not designed around the mid-game, and he just likes to instantly get a 3rd at 9:30, which is really early, get double NG Bay, and get an armory, and then just start working on upgrades. However, that means that he can't actually engage with this army because it's not reproducing. You can't lose it, you can't lose the drop, you can't lose any part of it at all. And so what he likes to do is just kind of take map control and stay back. However, DeMuslim, who also uses this build, does the exact opposite. Instead of getting this 3rd command center, he actually throws down 3 more barracks right now to get to the 5 racks and reactive starport that Bomber's build gets you really fast. He likes to get there now so that he can actually attack with this army that's really early, really fast, and then be able to reproduce without dying to any sort of counterattack. So they both have their merits. Thorzain's is very late game focused because he is the Spoon Terran. That's what Thorzain likes to do. DeMuslim is very much late mid game where you get an early attack right now and then you follow it up with more aggression later. And again, they both have merits. It's entirely up to you which one you want to do, but just as long as you understand the difference between them. So again, it's 9:30. I'm moving out. This game I have 2 Medevacs, 6 Marauders, 18 Marines, and that's about what you'll usually have. And then, of course, these 2 Medevacs with 2 more on the way, hopefully. And so you just want to be taking map control with this army 100% of the time. And it's just so early that this build is really cool because of that reason. So that's Thorzain's TVP build, but DeMuslim uses it a lot also. And one more time, I'm going to walk you through the build really quickly. 10 depot, 12 racks. As soon as you have 17 supply, which is after your first Marine, do not build a second Marine. Get your orbital, get your command center on the low ground, get your second depot, and then you go follow it up with a second racks, 2 gases before your third racks, because you don't actually get a third racks, bunker on the low ground. Then with your first 75 gas, which should be as soon as this barracks finishes, you get a reactor on one and a tech lab on the other, and you actually start Marauder production and start Marine production as soon as they finish. Then once you have, and also start Stim. Then once you have 100 gas, you start your factory. And then once you have, and you also start your NG Bay. And then once the factory finishes, you start the starport, the reactor, the third gas. And then basically you're just getting the add-ons, or getting the upgrades when you can. You get combat shields as soon as you can afford it. You're getting medevacs as soon as you can afford it. You're getting +1 attack as soon as you can afford it. And you see right here we have 6 Marauders, 18 Marines, and 2 medevacs at 9:30, which is really early to have medevacs and to have Stim and to have all the upgrades that you want after 1 Rex FE. So that's the benefit of this build. That's Thorzain's TVP build. Thanks for watching.